This meeting is not over. It's just beginning.
What is she doing here?
This wasn't part of the plan.
The diamond on her finger was a lie, a sparkling bribe for a silence she hadn't agreed to keep. Clara stood in the center of the gala, watching her husband's reflection in a champagne flute as he leaned in to whisper into another woman's ear. He hadn't introduced her as his wife. He had introduced her as his assistant to the very board members who held his future in their pens. The betrayal wasn't a sudden blow. It was a slow, calculated suffocating of her identity. If Markus wanted a ghost for a wife, she was about to show him exactly how much a ghost could haunt. "Keep that smile fixed, Clara," Markus hissed, catching her in the periphery of the crowd. He didn't look at her. He was scanning the room for someone more important. "Your eyes look desperate." "It's unappealing. I look desperate because I'm standing in a room where everyone thinks I'm your employee." "Markus," she whispered back, her voice trembling despite her best efforts. "We've been married 3 years. My name is on the deed of the house you used as collateral for this firm." Markus's grip tightened on his glass. "And if this deal fails, there is no house. There is no firm. There is only the poor wife routine that I'm tired of hearing. Isabella's father is watching. If he thinks I'm tied down to a domestic anchor, he won't sign. Do you understand?" Before she could respond, Isabella Vance drifted toward them, her silver gown shimmering like a blade. She didn't look at Clara. She looked at Markus as if he were a prize she had already bought and paid for. "Markus, darling," Isabella purred, tucking her arm through his. "The board is ready. They're in the East Suite. My father wants to see the man who's going to lead this merger into the next decade." She finally flicked a glance at Clara, a smirk playing on her lips. "Your assistant can wait at the bar, can't she?" "This is for the inner circle only." Markus didn't hesitate. He didn't even look back. "Of course, Clara, go get some air. You look like you're about to faint." He walked away, his stride confident, leaving Clara standing in the middle of the marble floor, a literal shadow in a room of light. The humiliation was a cold weight in her chest. She watched them move toward the private elevators, the doors sliding shut on Markus's laughing face. She turned toward the balcony, needing to breathe, when a hand suddenly blocked her path. It wasn't a waiter or a guest. It was a man in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, his presence so commanding it seemed to pull the oxygen from the air. "He's a fool," the stranger said, his voice a low, melodic rumble. "He's trading a diamond for a piece of glass." Clara stepped back, her heart hammering. "I don't know who you are." The man smiled, but there was no warmth in it, only a predatory intelligence. "I'm the man who owns the building Markus just tried to sell. And I think it is time you and I discussed exactly what he's hiding in his basement." Clara stared at the stranger, her breath hitching. The man didn't just occupy space, he dominated it. His eyes were the color of a winter sea, cold, deep, and impossibly sharp. Behind him, the gala continued in a blur of gold and silk. But here, in this small pocket of the ballroom, the air felt electric. "You're Gabriel Thorne," Clara whispered, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. "The CEO of Thorne Enterprises." The man Markus had spent months trying to court for this merger, describing him as a ghost who never appeared at social functions. "And you are the woman who actually wrote the architectural proposal for the New Heights project," Gabriel said, his voice dropping an octave. It wasn't a question. Clara flinched. "I don't know what you're talking about. That was my husband's work." Gabriel stepped closer, invading her personal space just enough to be provocative. "I've spent 20 years reading blueprints, Clara. Markus writes like a man who wants to be rich. The New Heights proposal was written by someone who understands how light hits a stone floor at 4 in the afternoon. It was written by a restorer, someone who values the soul of a building over its price tag." He leaned in, his scent, sandalwood and cold rain, swirling around her. Why let him claim your genius while he treats you like a coat he has forgotten to check at the door? It's a partnership, she lied, though the word tasted like ash. Is it? Gabriel gestured toward the VIP elevators where Markus and Isabella had vanished. A partner is an equal. You are currently a liability he is trying to negotiate away. Isabella's father doesn't want a merger with a family man. He wants a shark he can control through his daughter. Clara felt a sickening lurch in her stomach. The personal liabilities Isabella had mentioned. It wasn't about the debt or the boutique. It was about her. Markus wasn't just hiding her. He was preparing to replace her to secure the contract. Why are you telling me this? Clara asked, her fingers tightening around her clutch until her knuckles turned white. If you're the one buying the firm, wouldn't you want the deal to go smoothly? Gabriel's smile didn't reach his eyes. I don't like being lied to. Markus offered me the building on Fifth Avenue as part of the collateral. He told me it was his sole property. He paused, his gaze dropping to the vintage watch on his wrist. My investigators found your name on the title, Clara. Without your signature, his little empire is a house of cards. The threat was silent, but deafening. Gabriel wasn't here to save her. He was here to use her. But for the first time in 3 years, Clara felt a flicker of something other than hurt. She felt power. He's signing the preliminary papers in 10 minutes, she said, her voice growing steadier. Then you have exactly 9 minutes to decide, Gabriel replied. Are you the wife who loses everything, or the owner who takes it back? Suddenly, the elevator doors chimed. Markus stepped out, his face flushed with triumph, his arms still locked with Isabella's. He spotted Clara with Gabriel, and his expression curdled into instant, panicked rage. Clara, get away from him! Markus shouted, rushing forward, his polished facade cracking in front of the entire room. Markus reached them in seconds, his face a mask of sweating composure. He didn't look at Clara, he looked directly at Gabriel Thorne, his eyes darting with the frantic energy of a man watching his life's work teeter on a ledge. Isabella trailed behind him, her gaze sharp and suspicious as she surveyed the proximity between the billionaire and the assistant. Mr. Thorne, Markus panted, forcing a hollow laugh. I see you've met my staff. Clara is quite diligent, but she tends to overstep. I hope she hasn't been wasting your time with trivialities. Gabriel didn't move. He didn't even blink. He simply stood there, a mountain of quiet authority against Markus's frantic waves. We were discussing architecture, Markus. Your assistant has a remarkably sophisticated understanding of structural integrity. More so than the man who put his name on the New Heights blueprints, I suspect. Markus's smile twitched. A vein throbbed in his temple. He turned to Clara, his voice dropping to a low, venomous hiss that barely carried over the orchestral music. I told you to stay by the bar. You're embarrassing me. Go to the car. Now? Clara looked at her husband, the man she had supported through 2 years of unemployment, the man whose late-night sketches she had refined into masterworks. She saw the fear in his eyes, but it wasn't fear for her. It was fear for his reputation. He wasn't protecting her. He was hiding the evidence of his own mediocrity. I'm not finished with my drink, Markus, Clara said. Her voice was quiet, but for the first time, it didn't shake. Isabella stepped forward, her heels clicking like a metronome. Is there a problem here? Julian. My father is waiting for the signature. We don't have time for personnel issues. She emphasized the word personnel with a sneer, her eyes lingering on the vintage lace of Clara's dress. There's no problem, Markus snapped. He grabbed Clara's wrist, his fingers digging into the bone. She's leaving. Actually, Gabriel intervened, his voice cutting through the tension like a chilled blade. I believe the lady is staying. In fact, I've invited her to join the final negotiation. I find her perspective on the Fifth Avenue property indispensable. Markus paled. The Fifth Avenue building was his ace in the hole, the collateral that secured Isabella's father's trust. He had untold anyone that the title was held in a joint trust that required Clara's consent for any transfer. "That's a private business matter, Gabriel," Markus stammered, his grip on Clara tightening. "Clara has nothing to do with the legalities of the firm." "On the contrary," Gabriel replied, tilting his head, "I think she has everything to do with it. Unless, of course, you've been misrepresenting your assets to the board." The threat hung in the air, heavy and jagged. Isabella looked between the three of them, her eyes narrowing as she sensed the shift in power. Before she could speak, a waiter approached, leaning in to whisper to Markus, "Sir, Mr. Vance is requesting the title deeds immediately. He says if they aren't on the table in 5 minutes, the deal is dead." Markus looked at Clara, his expression shifting from rage to a desperate, sickening plea. "Clara, please, just sign the temporary waiver. I'll explain everything later. I'll make it up to you, I swear." Clara looked at the hand on her wrist, then up at Gabriel, who was watching her with an unreadable expression. This was the moment. The truth was a match, and she was holding the box. "I left my pen in the car," Clara said slowly. Markus exhaled, a sob of relief escaping his throat. "Go get it. Hurry. I'll wait by the elevators." As she turned to walk away, Gabriel's voice followed her, a ghost of a warning. "Don't take too long, Clara. Some doors only stay open once." Clara walked toward the exit, but she didn't head for the parking valet. She headed for the ladies' lounge, her mind racing. She needed a moment of silence to think. But as she pushed open the heavy oak door, she heard a voice from the stalls. Isabella's voice, and the words stopped her heart. Clara stood frozen behind the marble partition of the lounge. The air here was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the cold, hard reality of Isabella's voice. "It's practically done, Dad," Isabella said, her tone light and predatory. She was clearly on a call. "Markus is pathetic. Really? He's so desperate to be someone that he is handing over the Fifth Avenue title on a silver platter. Once the merger is signed, we'll trigger the restructuring clause. We strip the assets, bankrupt his shell company, and he'll be out on the street before the first quarter ends." There was a pause as she listened to the person on the other end. She laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "The wife? Please. She's a nonentity. He's already told everyone she's just a hired hand. Once we have her signature on the waiver, she's irrelevant. I'll have Markus dump her by the weekend. It's part of the image cleanup I demanded. We can't have him tied to a shopkeeper when we take the firm public." Clara leaned against the cold stone wall, her stomach twisting. It wasn't just Markus's betrayal anymore. It was a coordinated execution. Markus was selling her out to buy a seat at a table that was already rigged to collapse under him. He was so blinded by his own ego that he could unsee Isabella was the one holding the knife. She looked at her reflection in the gilded mirror. Her face was pale, her eyes wide, but the shock was being replaced by a terrifying clarity. She had been the domestic anchor, the one who stayed up until 3 a.m. fixing his shaky calculations. The one who sacrificed her own dreams to fund his. She wasn't just his wife, she was the architect of his success, and he was about to trade her for a seat in a sinking ship. Clara straightened her dress. The fear that had paralyzed her for years was evaporating, leaving behind a cold, crystalline anger. She realized Gabriel Thorne hadn't approached her out of kindness. He was a shark who had smelled blood in the water, specifically the blood of Markus's dying reputation. She walked out of the lounge, her heels clicking with a new, deliberate rhythm. As she stepped back into the hallway, she saw Markus pacing by the elevators, checking his watch every 5 seconds. When he saw her, he lunged forward. "Did you get it? The pen? The waiver?" He hissed, reaching for her hand. "I have something better," Clara said, her voice eerily calm. "What are you talking about?" "Clara, we don't have time for riddles. Isabella's father is losing patience. Sign the damn paper. The Fifth Avenue building isn't just a property, Markus. It's my grandfather's legacy. It's the only reason you have a firm at all, she said, looking him directly in the eye. I'll buy you 10 legacies. Just sign. I'll sign, she whispered, leaning in close so only he could hear. But I want to see the final contract first. All of it, especially the restructuring clause. Markus froze. His eyes darted to the side. How do you know about that? I'm the architect, remember? She replied. I always look at the foundation before I trust the roof. Before Markus could respond, his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, and his face went ghostly white. It's Gabriel Thorne. He's pulling out of the secondary financing. Unless what? Clara asked. Unless I bring the real owner of the New Heights design to the table. Markus whispered, staring at her as if seeing her for the first time. He knows, Clara. He knows it was you. The air in the hallway felt thin, as if the oxygen was being sucked toward the VIP suite where the power players waited. Markus stood paralyzed, his phone still vibrating in his damp palm. The realization that Gabriel Thorne had unmasked him was a death sentence to his pride. He looked at Clara, not with love or even regret, but with the frantic calculation of a drowning man deciding whether to use his savior as a flotation device. You have to go in there, Markus whispered, his voice cracking. You have to tell them you were just a consultant, that the designs were a collaboration. If Gabriel tells the Vances I'm a fraud, the deal is dead before I even touch the pen. Clara looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw the hollow shell she had been decorating with her own talent for years. A collaboration, Markus. You didn't even know how to calculate the load-bearing requirements for the atrium until I stayed up 3 nights fixing your sketches. You didn't collaborate, you consumed. I did it for us. He hissed, grabbing her shoulders. Everything I've done, the networking, the late nights, even Isabella, it was all to get us to the top. Do you want to go back to that dusty shop? Do you want to be a nobody for the rest of your life? I was never a nobody, Clara said, prying his hands off her with a slow, deliberate force. I was just invisible. There's a difference. The elevator doors chimed, and Gabriel Thorne stepped out. He didn't look like a man at a party. He looked like a judge arriving at a sentencing. He ignored Markus entirely, his gaze locking onto Clara. There was a flicker of something. Approval, perhaps, in his cold eyes when he saw the way she stood her ground. The board is losing their collective mind, Markus, Gabriel said smoothly. Mr. Vance is currently under the impression that you've forged the ownership documents for the Fifth Avenue property. He's calling his legal team to discuss fraud charges. Markus let out a strangled sound. I can explain. It was a clerical error. Clara is right here. She's going to sign. I'm not signing anything for a man who is being bankrupted by his own partners. Clara interrupted. Markus spun around. What are you talking about? I heard Isabella on the phone, Markus. The restructuring clause isn't to help you grow. It's to strip your assets and dump you. They're using my property to pay off their own debts, and then they're going to throw you to the wolves. Isabella has already planned your image cleanup. Starts with me, and it ends with you in a courtroom. Markus's face went from white to a sickly gray. He looked at the closed doors of the suite, then back at Clara. The silence was heavy, interrupted only by the distant, muffled sound of the gala's orchestra. Gabriel stepped forward, his presence a physical weight. The wolves are hungry, Markus. I'm the one who owns the woods. He turned to Clara, extending a hand. The question is, Clara, do you want to watch the house burn, or do you want to own the land it sat on? Before Clara could answer, the suite doors swung open. Isabella stood there, her face contorted in a mask of impatient fury. Markus, what is taking so? She stopped, her eyes landing on Gabriel and then on Clara. What is she still doing here? She's here to negotiate, Gabriel said. Because as of 5 minutes ago, I purchased the debt on your father's firm, and Clara just became my primary consultant. Isabella's face drained of its carefully applied color, her polished composure cracking like cheap porcelain. Behind her, the murmurs of the boardroom grew louder, a low rumble of anxious investors sensing a shift in the atmosphere. The word debt had acted like a physical blow, and Gabriel's hand remained extended toward Clara, an invitation to a world Markus had tried to lock her out of. "That's impossible," Isabella stammered, her gaze darting to the tablet in Gabriel's other hand. "My father's firm is stable. We are the ones acquiring Markus's assets. You can't just buy us." "I didn't buy you, Isabella. I bought your father's over-leveraged interest in the harbor development," Gabriel said, his voice as smooth as a whetstone. "A project that is currently in technical default because the designs were, how shall I put this, architecturally unsound. It seems your firm has a habit of hiring men like Markus who prefer style over substance." Markus looked like he was about to be sick. He reached out to grab the doorframe, his knuckles white. "Clara, don't listen to him. He's just using you to get to me. We're a team. Tell them we're together." Clara looked at Markus, seeing the desperation of a man who realized he had sold his soul to a buyer whose check had just bounced. For years, she had been his silent partner, his ghostwriter, and his emotional shield. She had allowed him to take the credit because she thought his success was her security. Now she saw that his success was her cage. "We were never a team, Markus," Clara said, her voice echoing in the marble corridor. "A team doesn't hide its best player in the kitchen. A team doesn't lie to the world about who did the work." She turned to Isabella, who was now clutching her phone like a weapon. "And you? You were so busy planning how to discard the poor wife that you did unbother to check who actually holds the keys to the kingdom. My restoration shop isn't a failing hobby. It's the primary holder of the historical easements on the New Heights site. Without my personal approval, no one, not your father, and certainly not Markus, can move a single brick." The silence that followed was deafening. Isabella's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The non-entity had just revealed herself to be the only person in the room with actual leverage. Gabriel's eyes sparked with a dark, appreciative mirth. It seems the liability has become the lead stakeholder. He stepped closer to Clara, his presence a shield against Markus's growing panic. "The board is waiting. Clara, they need a signature to authorize the new project lead. They are expecting a man who lied to them. I told them they should prepare for someone much more formidable." "Clara, please," Markus begged, his voice a pathetic whimper. "If you do this, I'm ruined." "Everything we built, everything I built," Clara corrected him. She felt a strange, cold clarity. The man standing before her wasn't her husband. He was a stranger who had stolen her time. She took a step toward the boardroom doors, but a sudden, sharp shout from inside the suite stopped her. "Where is he?" Mr. Vance's voice boomed from the interior. "Where's the man who signed these fraudulent titles?" Security guards appeared at the end of the hall, their faces grim. Isabella looked at Markus, then at Clara, and finally at her own crumbling future. She realized the tide had turned, and, like a true predator, she prepared to sacrifice the weakest link. "He's right here, Dad," Isabella cried out, pointing a trembling finger at Markus. "He's the one who lied about everything." The betrayal came full circle with the speed of a guillotine. Isabella, the woman for whom Markus had been willing to erase his marriage, didn't hesitate for a second. As the security team and a red-faced Mr. Vance spilled out of the suite, she stepped away from Markus as if he were a contagious disease. "He told us he was the sole owner, Dad," Isabella shouted, her voice rising to a frantic pitch. "He said Clara was just a junior employee who had no claim to the assets. He forged the internal memos." Markus stood frozen, his eyes bulging as the world he had meticulously constructed dissolved into a nightmare. "Isabella, what are you saying? You knew. We talked about the restructuring in your car." "I have no idea what you're talking about," she snapped, her eyes cold and predatory. She turned to her father. He's been gaslighting us, trying to use our capital to cover up his own fraud. We're victims here, just like his poor assistant. Mr. Vance, a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite, marched toward Markus. You brought a fraudulent title to my table. In my world, that's not just a breach of contract. It's a declaration of war. My lawyers are already filing. You'll be lucky if you walk out of here with the shoes on your feet. Markus turned to Clara, his hands shaking. Clara, tell them. Tell them it was an honest mistake. Tell them you're my wife and you're giving me the authority. If you don't sign that waiver now, they'll take everything. The house, the shop, everything. Clara looked at the man who had spent the evening calling her a liability and an embarrassment. For 3 years, she had been the silent foundation of his life, bracing him against the weight of his own incompetence. The house is already gone, Markus, Clara said, her voice sounding foreign to her own ears, steady, crystalline, and devoid of the old fear. You put it up as collateral for a loan you couldn't pay back without this merger. You gambled our life on a lie, and you lost. Clara, please, he sobbed, reaching for her dress. She stepped back, and Gabriel Thorne moved into the gap, a wall of charcoal wool and absolute power. Gabriel looked down at Markus with the same clinical interest one might show a crushed insect. The security will escort you out, Markus, Gabriel said. But before you go, you should know that the Fifth Avenue property has already been transferred. Clara signed the papers 5 minutes ago, not to your firm, and not to the Vances. She signed them to a private trust in her own name. Isabella's scream of frustration was cut short by her father's sharp look. The Vances had been outplayed. They had tried to strip a man of his assets, only to find the assets had already been reclaimed by the woman they ignored. You think you've won. Markus hissed at Clara as the guards took his arms. You're nothing without me. You're just a restorer in a dusty shop. I'm the architect of this entire night, Markus. She replied softly. You just didn't read the plans. As they dragged him toward the service elevators, the hallway fell into a heavy, expectant silence. Mr. Vance looked at Clara, then at Gabriel, his eyes narrow. The merger is dead. But the New Heights project, it still needs a lead. Gabriel smiled, a slow, dangerous tilt of the lips. It has one, but I suspect her terms have just gone up. Suddenly, the lights in the hallway flickered as a loud crash echoed from the ballroom. The gala was ending, but for Clara, the real work was just beginning. The ballroom lights surged back to life, casting a harsh, unforgiving glare on the wreckage of the night. The crash had been nothing more than a tray of crystal flutes shattered by a startled waiter. But for Clara, it sounded like a symphony of breaking chains. She stood in the center of the corridor, no longer a shadow, but the axis upon which the room now turned. Mr. Vance cleared his throat, his expression shifting from rage to a desperate, corporate greed. Ms. Clara, or should I say, the real lead architect. My firm is still the largest developer in this city. We can offer you a contract that would make your husband's dreams look like child's play. Forget the restructuring. We'll give you your own division. Isabella stepped forward, a forced, sickeningly sweet smile on her face. Clara, we were just testing Markus's loyalty. Surely you can see that. We'd be a powerful team, women like us. Clara looked at Isabella, then at her father. She felt no anger anymore, only a profound, liberating indifference. You aren't a woman like me, Isabella. You're a woman who builds her throne on other people's sacrifices. And Mr. Vance, I don't need a division in a firm that's built on sand. She turned her back on them, her gaze finding Gabriel Thorne. He was leaning against the mahogany doorframe, watching her with an intensity that felt like a challenge. He wasn't offering her a hand to hold. He was offering her a seat at the head of the table. My car is waiting, Gabriel said quietly. The board of Thorne Enterprises is meeting at dawn to finalize the New Heights acquisition. They need the signature of the woman who actually drew the dream, not the man who tried to sell it. Clara took a deep breath. She reached up and unclasped the heavy diamond necklace Markus had forced her to wear. The bribe for silence. She walked over to a nearby pedestal and set it down next to a discarded program. It was a beautiful thing, but it was someone else's version of her. "I'll be there," Clara said, her voice echoing with a new, unshakable authority. "But under my name, and the restoration shop stays. I'm not changing my past to fit into your future." Gabriel's lips quirked into a genuine smile. "I wouldn't have it any other way." As she walked toward the grand exit, she passed the floor-to-ceiling mirrors one last time. She didn't see a poor wife or an assistant. She saw a woman who had survived the collapse of her own life and had the skills to rebuild it better. Markus was gone, a footnote in a story he thought he owned. Isabella was left to explain a failed merger to a room full of sharks. Clara pushed open the heavy brass doors, stepping out into the cool midnight air of the city. The skyline was vast, filled with steel and stone waiting for a soul. Cruelty is loud, but self-respect is quiet. It doesn't need to scream to be heard, it just needs to stand still while the lies fall away. Clara stepped into the waiting car, not as a passenger, but as the architect of her own destiny.